Well, it's 8 p.m. Friday night. Thank you for tuning in to this first edition of American Asylum. Thank you for tuning into or clicking on to this video. Thank you for being here with us. We're starting out. This is brand new show. You may have seen the mini show that we did before. Thank you for tuning into that one as well. That's sort of a taste of what is to come. We're going to be easy tonight. We're going to be a little easy tonight on what we bring. I don't have any guests this evening because we just want to start out basic and simple. But we will have people coming down the line, down the pike, to talk with us. Many people to talk with us on there. But before we start, always remember, there are many stories out there. There are stories you may not have heard. One thing is that the mainstream media has been keeping a lot of stories hidden from you the viewer. And, a lot of us here on YouTube, a lot of the creators here, try to bring out these stories. We hear them from day in, day out. We've heard the stories, with the situation in Disney, at the Disney parks, at the low attendance, which you don't hear too much of that out of the mainstream media. Then, of course, the situation with the Vic Mignogna case, which hasn't gone full mainstream yet. That's still going on. And there are many on top of stories, like something we will get into, the California crisis, whereas, we have the plague, that possibly is going to be coming into the state itself. And I'm not kidding. This is true. We've had typhus happen in the state of California because, you have a rat population problem, garbage, drug, feces, a lot of problems in there. We're not going to go into detail on there, but these are stories that, you don't hear that often. The California one is finally getting out there because the president has visited California, and he promised to do something about it. Now, one of the things that's been coming out recently that it hasn't been too much coverage. Now, understand, this part of the story is not to vindicate anybody, whether they did, didn't, did do. There is a new book coming out, and it is done by a documentarian. His name is Joel Gilbert. He has a book and a documentary coming out, and it is called The Trayon Hoax. Now, take the title with a grain of salt, and I'll explain why onto the situation. This is nothing to vindicate anyone on either side, whether it's George Zimmerman or Trevyon Martin. What the book highlights and what the documentary highlights is how this incident was used to fuel a false racism bit into the United States through the mainstream media and through politics. And for the reason is, you may ask yourself, well, this was the situation. That's correct. What happened was what happened. But the thing about it is, there are inconsistencies to the case itself that is now being brought out into light, especially in this documentary. I have not seen this documentary yet. I do plan to see it, to see, what evidence he has. But it seems like there is a lot of evidence out there. And basically, it's mostly the evidence that was in the court itself. It wasn't pulled forward. Now, the main part of this, and if you're not familiar with the Trevyon Martin case, the Trevyon Martin case was that in Florida, there was a young man by the name of Trevyon Martin. He was on his way back to I believe his father's home. He was staying with his father temporarily due to issues he was having where he lived further south. on there, so he's staying on there. He was just coming back. A gentleman who happened to be off duty, who I believe he was either home security or something to that nature. I don't remember that. I'm refreshed on that. Confronted him because he didn't recognize him, because this was in a complex, and they got into a scuffle, and Trevyon Martin was shot and killed. Now, there was a lot of evidence pro, against to the whole situation. We could sit here for hours upon hours talking about this, whether he was guilty, whether he was innocent, whether it's a little bit of both. This documentary is not to vindicate the whole situation on that. What the documentary has put out, and this is the major part of it, there was an attorney, Benjamin Crump, who basically had brought across a woman by the name of Diamond Eugene. If you're familiar with the woman, Diamond Eugene, you may have seen her on trial. She was the girlfriend of Trevyon Martin. Hold that thought for 1 second. You may ask yourself, wait a minute, I thought her name was Rachel Genitel. Yes, you are correct on that. That is very correct on that. And basically, that is the woman who testified in the case itself. Here is where it goes a little weird. Rachel Genitel is not Diamond Eugene. She signed the paperwork as Diamond Eugene in the letter that she wrote to Travyon's mother. But she is not Diamond Eugene. Diamond Eugene is a woman who was the girlfriend of Trevyon Martin. She is a completely different person, and she did not take the stand. She refused to take the stand at the Trevyon Martin case, and the lawyers decided to use Rachel, pretending her as to be Diamond. Now you got to think for yourself. Where the hell the ethics went up on this? Why didn't anybody pick up on this immediately? Now, supposedly this documentarian, he went out and went looking for her and actually found her and interviewed her. So what she says on the interview, that we have to see for ourselves on there. But what Joel, who's the documentarian, is what he was trying to explain is how the we might not have the situations that we have with Black Lives Matters. We might not have had the cop shooting. We might not have Ferguson. We may not have some of these issues. I can't say 100% it would not have happened, but this was a spark that was being used politically and through the mainstream media. And you saw how much that basically it was pushed through. There was not a day you did not hear this, even through the President Obama's mouth himself, and saying that, oh, I wish he was like my son, to the situation on there. How much of this narrative, the hands up, don't shoot situation and all that. And you saw how much of this developed into there. Now, this is not saying that there isn't racism in the U.S. or in the world. There's always going to be someone that just doesn't like certain people. That you can't get away from that. You're always going to have some of that situation. How bad is the situation? Sometimes it's hard to say, or you have to look at it from a perspective from numbers, as far as what's been going on recently, as far as that. And I'm not going to put those up to you there. I'll leave them up to yourselves to look at it, because there are many people who have done this. The matter is, and we've been seeing this, and it's constantly, is that the mainstream media will fuel an objective and to throw political aspects into the fold. We've already seen this past week, with the Brett Kavanaugh situation again, where someone has come across that said that there is another accusation, but the person who is supposed to be the accuser said none of this has happened. So was the Times wrong in what they put into their fold? It was an opinion piece, or were they correct? Maybe they're hiding the situation. in this case, it's to the point where they pushed a narrative. It ran the whole week, and it basically grabbed onto a life of its own. And that's where we have to be careful sometimes. We need not to snap to judgment when it comes to a case of this nature, where you had a young black boy with a hood on, named Trevyon Martin, and a gentleman by the name of George Zimmerman, who happened to be partially Spanish, who they were saying he was white and this and that. It doesn't matter onto the situation. It's what happened. Is George Zimmerman racist? I don't know. Never met the guy in my entire life. Was Trayon a good boy or bad boy? I don't know. Never met him. All I could say is that it's a situation that happened, which became tragic. Now, if someone out there decided to say, let's use this politically to run a political agenda, that's totally wrong. I'm surprised that if this comes out and this is if this is reconfirmed, I'm surprised this does not go through judicial review, because basically you had a case that ran and you put a witness on the stand that wasn't even a witness to the situation. You put a fake witness on the stand, and supposedly there's an audio file on her saying that she was basically upset that she did that, and it's a shame to see that and hear that on this, and this is all just from the trailer. He just showed this at a the press club on there. I'm still waiting for some reviews of it. Of course, this is being hidden, obviously, and I hope it comes forward, because it's not toward saying to, like I said, it's not to vindicate George Zimmerman. It's not to vindicate Trevyon Martin. They were both used for someone else's political agenda. That is the wrong thing. A tragedy of this nature, you hoisted on the petard and used it, as a focus to a protest, to a political election. You had situations like this, and it may have caused other actions to happen. It may have caused other dangers, assaults, or possibly maybe even a murder or two to happen because of this. When we look at this, we must allow the judicial system to go through its motions, to go, we have the judicial system for a reason. And if someone's trying to manipulate that situation, we need to pull that forward as well, because we need to allow it to happen. Now, I understand you may have not liked the verdict to this case. Now, if the other woman was on the stand, what would it sound like? I don't know. I haven't heard what she was supposed to have said. So, look at this with a grain of salt. This is going to be coming out very soon. I haven't got an actual date, but it should be out very soon. There is a book part of it that's going to be available on Amazon. Once again, it is called The Trayon Hoax. But like I said, take it for a grain of salt of when it says Trayon Hoax from one perspective. It is not to say to vindicate George Zimmerman or to vindicate Trayon. It is just basically to show that there are people out there that will use a case of this nature to fuel their political agenda. And speaking of fueling political agendas and situations, there's another novel, and we're continuing. This is the second part of this, storyline. Is we're going to move over, and we're staying in Florida, and we know of the Parkland shooting, and basically there is a book out also as well. It is from one of the fathers of the Parkland shooting victims. The book is called Why Meadow Died: The People and Politics That Created the Parkland Shooter and Endangered American Students. Now, one thing, and this is what I always believed in this case of the Parkland shooter, that the failure wasn't not only the police department, that it was also the politics of the situation, that the politicians. The book was written by Andrew Pollock, who basically his daughter, Meadow Pollock, was killed in the Parkland school. One of the things that, I was saying to myself, and I always talking around round tables when I talk with people, is that they knew that this young man had problems, and that basically they said he was kicked out of school. But from what I understand, and this is what's said in the novel, is that he was checked from time to time coming into the school. He was always disruptive. He always had some run-in with the law, but the law didn't do really not too much to curtail what he was doing. In other words, he wasn't arrested that often. And that was because of the way the politics was handled in Broward County. Now, you may ask yourselves, Zane, how to this nature? I lived in Dade and Broward County, between the two counties, for about 10 years. When I was in Florida, when I was working production down in Florida. And some of the laws between the two counties were a bit crazy. And I'll tell you that. And the issues with the schools, the high schools and stuff like that, a lot of the stuff that could have been done was not remedied by the situation. Now, when I first got down there, I was working in a mall till I got my first production job. And behind the mall was a high school. And basically the high school was known for its troublemakers all the time. And I'm talking really bad troublemakers. And on occasion, we had situations where people got stabbed in the bathroom in the mall. And this happened on numerous occasions. And a lot of times, basically, the cops didn't really do too much other than try to hold the kids out. I mean, the mall put issue to situations where they stopped having the kids come in. They didn't allow them coming in during lunch. And people fought on that. Oh, why can't they come in during the lunchtime and stuff like that? But that's mostly when it happened. They try to... what's that old line they used to say, boys will be boys or girls will be girls. They try to put the situation and say, well, they're kids and they don't really understand the situation. Well, if they didn't understand the situation, why are they stabbing people, with knives or shooting people with guns? I mean, we didn't have too many shootings. We had more knifings, but that was the whole thing, is that you had young people that were just sitting there day in, day out, having fights, dealing with situations, stealing, giving issues against each other. And the politicians and law enforcement didn't do a single thing to remedy the situation. It hurt the businesses in that mall. Let me tell you something. It hurt the business. A lot of the businesses moved out. I had already left when basically they started to resolve some of them. And this was on the Dade side of the county line. And I knew one of the teachers. I worked with one of the teachers in Dade County. And he says, yeah, it is a problem. It was a problem then. And it probably is still a problem today. You had a lot of issues in these schools where basically they allow students with problems, whether it's mental, whether it's, they just basically prone to violence. They have issues from home, and basically they just don't want to resolve those issues. To get involved into the family issue, but if they step over the line, they should be arrested. I mean, you had an issue down there, and I remember this when I was down there, where a young boy, I think it was he did a wrestling move on a child and murdered her. I mean, killed her. I mean, he just literally, I think it was he did a body slam or something to the nature. I don't remember that. And they had sentenced him to a long imprisonment. And basically, it got overturned. They let him go after a time. People saying, "Oh, he was too young," this and that. Little time later, he was rearrested and put back in jail because basically he stabbed somebody. So, you have issues where when you talk about controlling guns and gun violence and the situation, and you're not really addressing the situations because the true situations are right there in front of you. You have people with mental issues and stuff like that. If the police would have arrested the Parkland shooter back then, I don't think he would have able to get a gun. Now, would that have stopped him from going into the school and doing something else? Hard to say. Probably, maybe not. It's hard to say to the situation. But if he was put into the system of justice, we might have had a different situation and resolved within a good remedy. Whereas this person could have been taken out of the loop and this whole incident would not have happened. And like the Trevyon story, you see how much politicization they did to this case as well. They use it. Oh, the Parkland shooter. We got to ban this one. We have to ban everything. When you look at the stats, and you can look this up. These are FBI stats that are on there. Guess what? AR-15s are not the highest used weapon around on any shooting. The highest weapons are either handguns, knives, fists, bats. Those are the things that are used more likely than what they call long rifles, which is what an AR-15 is. And before anybody says that, AR-15 does not mean assault either. AR is the name of the company. Okay, they just happens to look like the initials of assault rifles. We do not have assault rifles. We do not have AK-40. I was listening to this the other day. God, what's her name from Charm? She's talking to Ted Cruz, and she says, they're talking. Said we can't have these AK-47s. I says, but we don't have AK-47s legally on the streets. Illegally, different story. Legally, there's not to that nature. You have to understand, weapons of war. Anything is a weapon of war. When you look at it in the perspective, and you say, well, let's ban all handguns. Beto Cruz, we're coming for all your guns. Take every gun off the street. If you could take every gun off the street, if you could do that, guess what? You would have the same issues that you have in London right now. Stabbings are up in London. People using knives, mallets. They're using what they call it. There's like the big, those big knives they used to chop meat with. They're using all those types over there instead of guns. You're not going to stop someone from doing violence. You have to catch them before they do the violence. And you say, well, how can we do that? We've been working on it for many years. In my other show, Man with the Show, we discussed about mine hunters, the behavioral science department. That department has been growing for many years. And their job is to do profiling. And basically, when you have a situation where you have someone acting a certain way, we need to discuss this. And, the people, there are many agencies throughout the country, mental health agencies that have been formed through donations. Here in New York City, we have several in the outer boroughs. I know there's some on Staten Island. I know in Brooklyn as well. Manhattan has their own as well. where they have people. There are people who come to your door if you're having issues. They do. There are. When you go see your doctor these days, if you ever gone to a clinic, one of the first things they ask you in a clinic: do you feel depressed? And the person, if you say, well, yes, I am, they'll have you talk with somebody. And if it becomes to a situation where they see that you could be a danger to yourself, they will send you in to the hospital. They do have people who come to your homes to check up on you, make sure you're okay. I'd seen it through my neighborhood. They don't have enough people. That's one thing about the situation. They don't have enough people to handle it because, they're dealing with local funds. But at least the funds are there. They're independent funds, that are outside the hospital's perspective. They're being paid. They're being paid, by, local funds. And basically, these people come out and help. We have to utilize everything we can to resolve these situations. We can't hide, say if someone has a problem and they're acting really weird, something like that, talk to them, say, you need help, situation. And if they, they get really agitated, maybe they do need some sort of help. They say something, see something, say something. And I think we need to start doing it with this as well. There was a time period when they used to put people in mental asylums. I'm not saying we need to go back to that kind of a situation because that was a problem within itself. And, we can go through the whole history of that. But and this is what the book brings. Andrew Pollack's book brings up. These are the issues that parents need to know about. Is that you have people out there that are not being helped, and they're being a danger to the community itself because we don't know what they're going to do next. And that is the scariest part of the whole situation. I was glad that some of these mental health agencies were around back when I was younger too, because there was a time I myself had some questions and issues in my life that I was very confused of, and I was helped through it. And I saw people that were going through these programs that needed a lot of help. A lot of help. And, I spoke to some of them. And, when you're sitting in the room, sometimes when you wait for your appointment, you talk to some of these people. And when you hear what they say sometimes, it's scary. It's not Charles Manson scary, but it's just to listen to how they describe things. It's just very unsettling. How many of those out there are there? Look what's going on in California. You have a lot of mental issue problems on the streets of California right now. And in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, you have a health crisis going on. There was a time period when we had Giuliani as mayor in New York City. He was trying to resolve some of these situations. The streets were getting cleaned up. We weren't getting the issues like we used to. I tell you, I grew up in the 70s. It was a scary time period. 70s was a scary time period to grow up in. Because basically, you wanted to make sure you were home by dark. Because you never know if someone was going to come after you to that situation. So the book is called, again, Why Meadow Died. The other book is The Trayon Hoax. Both of them available through Amazon itself. Do pick them up. I'm going to pick up the Trayon on there. Why Meadow Died. I'm just about to start to read on that myself. And like I said, they're available out there. So it's interesting to see that, some of this information is starting to get out. And I hope someone takes, when they listen to this, they pass this on to other people. So we'll be back in just a moment. We're going to take a bit of a quick little thing break on here. A little bit of an announcement on there. And we'll be right back right after this. Well, we're back in again. Thank you for tuning in once again. Don't forget, before we get into this next section, don't forget to hit that subscription and like on there. Share this video. If you enjoyed this program, the first episode on there, share it with some people out there, because there's a lot more content coming on this show, a lot more that we'll be discussing. And like I said, we're going to have people on here talking with us as well. Now, let me ask you the quick question for everybody on there. Does comedy offend you in any way whatsoever? Are you someone that just basically, sometimes a comedian can get you really, really mad on some of the things he says on there? Because comment below. Let me know, how you feel about this, on there. Or are you a person that says, hey, listen, comedy, having a good laugh, sometimes, may not agree with the comedian, it's okay to have that. Do you feel in that kind of position as well? But what we're talking about here, just recently, cancel culture strikes again. No matter how much you feel about cancel culture, whether you believe it or not, there are people out there that says, it doesn't exist. There is a cast member on Saturday Night Live recently that was fired, Shane Gillis, over a racial slur. Now, I just heard before we went on air, that when we taped this, basically, I listened to the part that basically they're talking about, and it wasn't really funny, but it doesn't qualify to be racial in a way. He used the stereotype naming for Asians, but I don't see that as being a major problem to get him fired over, because this was something on the outside. Because, if you haven't watched recently, great video that's out now on Netflix is Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones. And there is a segment in there that basically he talks about his days on the Chappelle Show, that, he couldn't say certain things. I think it was something about transgender, if I'm not mistaken, on that. And he went to the people that handle the standards and practices on there, and they were like, no, you can't have it because you can't talk about it because you're not one of them. You can't be, if you're not transgender, you can't talk about it. And he walked away. Then he turned back and said, well, can I talk about being the N-word? And he goes, well, yeah, that's fine. And he says, but here's the problem. I'm not the N-word. And you see what I'm getting at. People, there are people that get very offended on things we say these days. And we fought long and hard, and from the comedian point of view, if you go back in history, to be able to say a lot of things. You can go back and look back in history. Chappelle is one of them on there. There's another good Netflix special, Bill Burr. He's fantastic. If you haven't watched that yet, it's just now recently. It's on Netflix also. But if we turn back, the clock on time on there, you had guys like Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, Red Fox. And we can go all the way back to Lenny Bruce. Now, if you're not familiar with Lenny Bruce was a comedian out there, and he was pretty vulgar in his time period. There's a great movie about Lenny, and it's played by Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman does a fantastic performance of Lenny Bruce. And, and the thing about it is that in Lenny Bruce's time, years ago, he was arrested for some of the things he said at some of the venues that he went to. And I'm not talking about that he was just like, they escorted him out of the building. I mean, he was actually booked, And in the same time period, there was another comedian in the audience on there in one of his events, and it was George Carlin. And this is another man who also, George, fantastic. He's been arrested too, especially for the seven bad words, that whole segment of 7 bad words. And there is a segment in the 80s called Carlin and Carnegie Hall. And he does a longer list of the words. I would say go out there if you could find it on there. Last time I saw it, wasn't on Netflix. I think it was on Amazon. You were able to see that one, and it's entitled Carlin and Carnegie if you find it. And it's a very long list of a lot of words that are unbelievable. But getting back to this, when you look at a guy like Shane Gillis on there, Saturday Night Live, and you look at it and he says, well, we can't have this, we can't talk about that, we can't act like this. But for years, we've had comedians do many different things. Now, I'll take you a perfect example. Eddie Murphy did this whole bit where he dressed it up as a white guy. So did Dave Chappelle. And nobody had a problem with that. Nobody goes back to that and says, well, hey, listen, we shouldn't be doing that. No whatsoever. But, people have problems with, if we talk about the situation. Now, understanding, recently with the Trudeau situation with the blackface, people should, that's another insensitivity situation. Yeah, we can understand on there. But that was years ago. And people look at it today, it's like, oh, he must still do it today. No, not necessarily. It doesn't make him racist. People have put on makeup to disguise themselves, like in Halloween and parties and stuff like that. This is not like they've gone out on the streets on a regular day and thrown blackface on themselves and walk into their job this way. Or they've gone to a protest dressed this way. But getting back to comedy, you've had many comedians do many different bits and talk about it. I mean, you could go over to Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live itself, they say they fired him over for saying the C word on Asians. But meanwhile, they've made fun of Asians on the show throughout the years, going all the way back to John Belushi. I mean, Belushi did the samurai bits, which was, those were really hysterical. They were really funny. And I think more recent, they did this whole thing about the people who make Apple phones. They did a whole bit where the guys was just sitting there and pretending to be Asian. Why hasn't anyone picked that apart? It's a ridiculous thing. And when you look into this perspective these days, and when you look at late night television, comedy on late night television, everything on late night television is just in one direction, in one political direction. And you may to yourself, hey, well, late night talk show is supposed to be political. Yeah, you're right. It is supposed to be very political. And to the point that you got to be balanced on the situation. I mean, how many times have you turned into a late night talk show and it's turned into bashing the president of the United States? It's practically almost pretty much every night. There's plenty of other political comedy out there is fun. That's been, hysterical. You can make fun of on there. I mean, how many times have they made fun of Joe Biden, on these late night talk shows? Not as much as they do with Donald Trump, And there used to be shows, I think years ago. What was it? Not necessarily the news. And they used to do a lot of politics. And it was fun. And they did it from all ends. But when you looking at the hypocrisy of the situation is when a gentleman like this, was making a comment to the situation from telling a tale of a point of view on something in a comedic sense, and to get fired over that. I mean, where does the line drawn? On our Man with the Show episode, we discussed over there on how a Star Trek writer was telling a story about something in his life, and he added the N word, and someone went to basically HR and complained about it. And the next day, the guy, when they went to talk to the guy, the writer quit, because you're not going to be fair when you start to say nitpick everything that you discuss. I mean, a lot of these comedians that are not with us anymore, I know they've got to be turning in their graves, because basically, you've seen all this that, you can't discuss anymore. And, when you have someone like Chappelle, and Chappelle just blew it out of the water. I mean, literally blows it out of the water when it comes to, he talked about, he said, hey, listen, this is what's going on, and it's funny. And you have people like, no, don't see the special, don't, and this was, I mean, I kid you not. These were the things that were being written in the papers the next day. Do not see this Netflix special. It is a very offensive special. But let me give you a hint. This is the same type of comedy Dave Chappelle has been giving us for years. If you go back to the Chappelle Show. I mean, I love I'll tell you, I always loved the Chappelle Show. One of the things is I would love to have Dave here and talk with him about those days and stuff like that. And a lot of the things that he went through, he discussed on something, but there's a lot more to it, because some of the stuff that was on there was like, had to really, standard practices must have freaking hit the ceiling on some of the bits that were on that show. I mean, the racial draft alone, I mean, if you haven't seen the bit on and you could see it on YouTube on the Comedy Central, they had this whole bit, the racial draft, so like the NFL draft on there, where they, picking people out left and right on there. And, how, from that point of view to today, a lot of people will consider that very offensive. It's like someone says, grow a backbone to the situation. It's just jokes. It's comedy. It's making levity of a situation that happens on a daily basis. You can make fun of a lot of things in the world. Comedy is comedy. They're just basic, simple. All the world is the stage, and we're just merely players upon it. Shakespeare said that once. And it's interesting how now people are just like saying, they just put it out themselves. And some of them get caught doing it themselves. Sarah Silverman, perfect example. This is one that she was like, was slamming everybody for what they're saying, especially blackface. And guess what happened? She got caught with a picture with her blackface, and she's like, well, I did it in a bit. Yeah, right. You did it as a bit. And other people are doing it as bits and pieces on some of there, and you're using it. Now, in the case of Trudeau, he was at a party. Is he part of a comedy? No. The situation was out of taste? Probably. But that was the time period. That was the past. This is the now. And everybody wants to just pick and choose things from people's past. They start looking back at stuff that we said in the past, especially comedians. I mean, you saw what happened with Kevin Hart when he was trying to host the Oscars. They went back and they said, well, you said this back years ago. You should apologize for it. And let me tell you one thing. From someone who's been in this business a long time, we should not apologize for things like this, of what we've said to the points that, we're trying to make, especially if you're a comedian. If you've made a joke and people don't like it, this is, well, I'm sorry you didn't like it, but that's the way the way it goes. If you don't like it, there's the door, or there's the channel button on the switch on your remote control. These days, your remote control, turn it off, turn to another channel, don't pay attention to it, and that's it. Or stick your head in the sand and scream really loud. And even today, here, being on YouTube, there are some words we cannot even say on here, or we get in trouble with YouTube. We get demonetized and stuff station. I mean, when did it just really become this harsh? I mean, we have a constitution. It's a freedom of speech. And, we discuss this constantly, that, we have these rights on there. But yet, you go out and he says, well, you can't say this and you can't say that because you insult people this way. People get insulted for many, many different things. Have I been insulted for many different things? Yeah. Do I get mad about it? Yeah. But I don't expect them to basically come out and just basically tell them to stop doing it, stop saying it to that point. They have their opinion. Fine. Brush it against yourself. Goodbye. So long. Farewell. But, to get fired over something, I mean, how can, to the premise of this situation, how many people have been fired for things like this? And then there's those who get upset when you make a funny aspect on something. I'll give you an example. I think somebody had made a joke about the Black Widow, a non-existent character. It's a comic book character, and people got upset about that. And they apologized for that. I was like, "What? This is just a character in a comic book, Why do you get offended?" And it's just the points that we put that where we get offended and we do is just it gets crazy. I mean, I can go back all the way back to Michelle Wolf when on her Netflix session where she did that whole praise of abortion. Which, some people did get mad at it, but where was the overcast of it that was way out of taste? I mean, I didn't find it funny. I found it offensive. Was she allowed to do it? She did it. She did it. Nobody liked it, but, you have the situation where it's like, oh, I can do this, but, you can't do that. And that's the pointing figure. It's like that, that teacher that just sits there that, points and is, you can't do this, that you're not allowed to do this. And this is something that, that's been building for years. I mean, how's people going to take there's another Netflix special movie that's coming out in October. Eddie Murphy is playing Rudy Ray Moore, Dolomite. And if you're not familiar with Dolomite, type it in on there. Look at the trailers. Look at the comedian. Rudy Ray Moore was a comedian that basically he was pretty raunchy at the time period. Pretty out there, very strong as far as his bits. Something to today's nature would be very extremely offensive to a lot of people. And this is coming out. I don't know how they're gonna handle it on Netflix as far as how far are they going on the comedy bits with him, because it's sort of like a documentary-ish type situation, film about Rudy Ray Moore. But let's see how far they take it on this when it airs next month. But that's an example. There's many of others that you got guys like Blowfly. That's another one. Type it in. Offensive as hell. His stuff would not fly today. I mean, he did a whole bit on the President of the United States. He did stuff on, I think one of the funniest things he's ever done was how he sexualized certain songs like Lionel Richie and Marvin Gaye and stuff like that. And he just added things on there that just to certain songs that people will be like, no, you can't do that. And then now we hear Eddie Murphy might want to do another special. He wants to do after so many years. I mean, how far would he go with that? I mean, right now on Netflix, you can see Delirious and the Raw, both Delirious and Raw. And I mean, Eddie Murphy does make fun of Italians in there and gays and, many different cultures. And even his own, his own family, he makes fun of as well. Would he do that now, today? Put it in that perspective in your mind. How much, would he take that step? Just like Dave Chappelle. Would Dave Chappelle wasn't afraid to sit there and tell people, listen, you've made yourself crazy. I'm going to tell the jokes that I'm going to tell, and if you're offended, the door is there. It's not my fault. Some of the things didn't happen. I didn't cause those things to happen, but we're going to make fun of it. This happens. It is part of life. We have to laugh sometimes at certain things, and we've done that many times as a culture. We laughed at many things, but now it's to the point whereas, well, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. When you isolate, especially like when you're talking about, like, for example, the alphabet people, and you say, like, well, you can't talk about that at all. I say, why? Because you just can't. But that's not an excuse. Everybody's fair game in these days. If you isolate one, then you got to isolate all. Then you can't have comedy at all. Everybody can be made fun of. I mean, there are plenty of movies that basically alphabet people have been put into situations, that were comedies and stuff like that, and they were made fun of. But they also have had serious movies about themselves. I mean, have anyone ever watched La Caja Falls, or done in the American version, The Birdcage? Good movie, very good movie. Made some funny references and stuff like that. The American version, you had Hank Azaria. And we talked about this on Man with the Show with Hank Azaria. He did the Spartacus role on there, and he was fantastic doing that. And then you look over to where he's on The Simpsons and he does Apu, and people are like, no, can't do Apu. You can't do Apu at all. No. It's very racial. But the thing about it is, the character was funny, and he did a good job of it. And it was a show about stereotyping. When you look at The Simpsons, you look at Family Guy, you look at American Dad, you look at the Venture Brothers, you look at Rick and Morty. These are animated shows like this that make fun of the culture itself. We make fun of a lot of things in the world. And, we need sometimes this to alleviate some of the pressures, some of the things that are going on there. A good laugh is healthy for you. But we need to stop these situations where and I say this on Man with the Show, there's that small little percentage of people. They're just basically not fans. If they are fans, they don't watch enough of it, to be a fan. And then there are those that just want to see the world burn. And that's just basically what it is. It's just that there are people out there that just don't care. They just don't want it they just don't want it around them. They're trying to get rid of the red meat. They're trying to get rid of the way we dress, the way we talk, what we watch on TV. They're doing all this just because they don't like it. Well, I'll give you a thought on this. If you don't like it, as my mother used to say, you don't have to eat it. Just push it away and that's it, and move on with your life. Don't disturb everybody else's life because you don't like it. There are plenty of other things in the world to look at, plenty of other things to read in the world that, you don't have to concentrate on someone like a Shane Gillis or a Dave Chappelle, or basically a George Carlin, or basically a certain TV series or novelization, or certain politician and stuff like that. It just frightens me. And, we discussed this before in the earlier slot with how, the effects of media with the Trevyon Martin case and the Parkland shooting. And, you wrap all this together and it's in one bow, and all of it's together and it all interacts to the situation. And sometimes you just got to look at it and laugh, because how insane have people have become? I mean, and this is, like I said, it's a small portion of our population. What happened to them? Did this happen in school? Did this happen at home? I mean, where did they go in that direction? And when you look at it and they start to say, well, I remember 20 years ago you did this, and you should be fired because you did this 20 years ago. But that's 20 years ago. If I was a young man and it was something that I shouldn't have done, okay, fine. That was then. It's not the person I am today. People change. There's a line in a Doctor Who episode when they're doing one of the regenerations, says we are different in parts of our lives, from our youth to the end of our lives. You know, we grow, we change. You know, we become different persons in different parts of our lives. And I do believe that, you know, wholeheartedly, because basically, you know, you have these situations. You know, I was different when I was younger. You know, I was, you know, was out for the adventure, but I was still cautious, you know, in what I did, because, you know, that's the way I was. Today, I'm out there straight out. And basically, I've done a lot in my life. I've taken myself to different levels. I've went around the country a bit. I spent time outside from where I used to live, and I live somewhere else now. I've been back home, but I've been all over the place for a while. You know, some parts of it has been a mistake. Some parts of it was an education. But maybe that's the way we should look at these situations. When you look at it from a comedic sense, you have to take it that there are parts of life that are just basically a stereotypical part of life. And we must take it with, you know, a grain of salt, and sometimes with a good chuckle laugh. And there are things that are tragic in life. And sometimes you can make levity of the situation at the right time. It's like the South Park episode where they talk about, says, can we talk about make fun of AIDS? Can we make fun of 9/11? You know, it's all in the timing of the situation. It's not saying to make jokes like that on tragedies, but there's things around it that can be, you know, added to some levity to the situation. And, you know, sometimes some comedians can go over the edge and, yeah, on that. But that's being a comedian. Comedian, you're always at the edge of, you know, saying certain things. And that's part of the comedy. Like I said, go back, catch that Lenny Bruce movie. Listen to what he says. Listen to how he, you know, what he says to people on there. Go watch an early Carlin comedic bit. Or go watch a Richard Pryor, or a Red Fox, or Dice Clay. Man, talk about, you know, inflation. I didn't even talk about him yet. You know, Andrew Dice Clay, you know, this guy got banned from MTV for saying some of the things. And this is years ago, because of how harsh he was. What does he do these days? He acts here and there. He's back. He's still around. You know, he's not like it used to be. But, you know, it goes to show you, you know, there are things that, you know, some comedians could say and go over the line and get in trouble for. And there's ones that just hit that line, but it's still funny. You're always going to get, you know, that kind of comedy constantly. And I see videos all the time on YouTube where guys have to handle hecklers. They're just sitting there saying, well, you know, we're all different in one way or another, yeah. And the person's trying to yell back at the guy, you know, the comedian saying something about, you know, gender and stuff like that, and they're trying to give a scientific explanation. He said, dude, this is a comedy bit. You don't need to explain it. It's like going to a Star Trek, the old joke about the Star Trek conventions where the guy says, well, in episode 39, you beamed down, but you didn't use this, that, and the other thing to beam down, and you didn't hit the right switch. Why wasn't it that? And that's what we've become to. We've become to claiming that part where we become, you know, the con person there that just gone completely crazy. So, got one more little thing before we finish off tonight, and we'll be right back right after this little bit of a break on there and to have our final word, and we'll be back in just in a moment. Yeah, that's right. We are here always every Friday night, 8 p.m. Some of our episodes will be pre-recorded, sometimes of the nature, and other times we will be live. And like I said, we're working on a lot of guests to come on board on here, on there, and you will see a listing coming out very soon, episode to episode, as it comes across our tables on there. So, to wrap up everything, we looked at different perspectives on there. We looked at the media, how media has been basically just wrapping their finger around a lot of things. And some of this stuff may have offended you, but don't let it offend you. Take a choice, a moment to be informed to the situations. Take a moment to read some of this information. I mean, if you see a newspaper article or an article online, don't read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. Go through and read the entire page on there, because for the reason is that most of the mainstream media will tell you, wants you to know their positions within the first 3 paragraphs. But after that, they have to be more conscious in telling you what really is going on, and that's really toward the bottom of the page. We just recently had the Kavanaugh situation where there was another accuser, but we find out that the person that was accusing him, and we didn't find him out till later in the line, or later on, they didn't add it back until later in the New York Times article, which was an opinionated article, that the person denied it ever knowing that this ever happened. And it angered, people to find out. They said, oh, look at this. There's still, this guy's, he's a sexist guy, such and such. But once again, there is no evidence to the fact nature. I mean, we just found out recently in an interview from the lawyer of Christine Blasey Ford that she came forward because she didn't want any changes to Roe versus Wade. You don't know what is in the mind of this judge to the situation. You're making judgment on people before they're able to do their job right. And it is amazing how, people throw themselves and thrust themselves into the circus that has become today what we're dealing with. And, you have had many situations go on. I mean, here in New York City, we've had many different problems that have been going on. And we have had a mayor who's just basically not been there. He's been trying to run for president. As of today, he has withdrawn his part to become, to run for president of the United States now. Is he going to do his job? No, he's probably going to end up traveling like he's been doing for his entire motion in the office that he's holding as mayor. Nothing is getting done. I mean, there are boroughs in the city of New York, they didn't get all their funding for their summer program, so some of the summer programs got cut. We didn't get all of our summer programs this year. I mean, where was he on the situation? I mean, where is he in the situation now? I mean, here's something that you probably haven't heard yet. We're having problems, I think it's in Queens or in Brooklyn, where there are people of Jewish descent being attacked. There are hate crimes that are going on in New York City, and it's not like 1 or 2. It's already been about a dozen of them that has happened within the last couple of weeks, and the media hasn't picked up on it that much. I mean, it's been buried in the back to the situation, and this is not stuff that's just like people being pushed around. I mean, there were people being hit with bricks on their head, and this is not yet reported, and this is an issue. But yet, if it's a situation where someone of of white color has an argument with someone of any minority, it becomes top news. Or if there's a shooting where it's basically the person happens to be white, and it's just get pushed into the news, heavily on there. I mean, that is politicizing it, to the point you're using it. And that's what we talked about before with the Trevyon book that's out, the Trevyon hoax. They used the Trevyon tragedy as a political statement. And basically it didn't give us the real truth of, the truth of the pudding to the situation of what really happened. And the answers are there in front of us, but, they switched a witness, because the one witness didn't want to come forward, so they decided to put another prop them up as that witness. And that person had nothing to do with the situation. And it's a shame how this is going on in the world. And, especially here in the U.S., and this is why we created American Asylum, because how much of an asylum have we become to the situation? I mean, in California, we have a major crisis going on there. Basically, you have a homeless situation. You have a health situation, rat infestation, typhus. We had cases of typhus there. I mean, they're talking the Black Plague and stuff like that. And, we're talking about this week, I think, leprosy. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, a case of leprosy in California, and nothing is being done to the situation. The money that's been flowing into these cities that basically on there, where is it going to? I mean, we here in New York City, we have a rat problem as well, but we do have a program to handle it. There are agencies that are handling it, both city and also independently. There's some groups out there. I know there's a group that have trained dogs, and they go out on I don't know if it's a weekly or every couple of days or so, and they go in and go bag some rats using these dogs. These dogs hunt them down at night. And basically they can't put a program like that up on the West Coast. But see, that is the mentality of the situation. We left to, whereas there is an imbalance of politics and an imbalance of basically, what our comments are, toward these situations. You have people that says, well, we only can have it this way. All other ways are considered hate, racial situation. No, when you have a conversation, it's a two-way conversation. It's not a one-way conversation. You can have your opinion and I can have mine. And that is the whole premise of the show, is that, to bring out our opinions to the nature of what is going on in our neck of the woods. And it is the most craziest, insane things that have been going on. I mean, it is frightening to go out the door of a home these days. You can offend someone by saying one little word, and suddenly, you have everybody on you. There is an episode of Family Guy, which, Brian had said, I made a joke, and then suddenly, everybody's after him with pitchforks and torches. Even though it's a funny bit that they did, but that's the truth of what's going on these days. We have a situation where a man was accused of fondling children, but there is a lack of evidence to the nature, and basically he is berated online. And basically right now it's on trial where the gentleman lost his job, and what we're talking about is the Vic Mignogna case, whereas basically now we're up to mediation, that the judge says to mediate or, face appeal, to the situation, because there were some things that were dismissed. And now it's possibly that this case could start all over again on appeal, or, just finally maybe the mediation will wipe this whole out. It's a shame. But once again, comment below and let me know how you feel the whole situation of the whole entire show. Like I said, This is just the first episode. I thank you for tuning in on that. And, we have more shows to come, more discussion out there on many, many different things that are happening, because, these are the things that are going on. And like I said, you have the California thing, you have the gun situations where, they're and let me put in these final words before we go away on this episode. There's an old saying like Alice, only believe the three things before breakfast. And I say that strongly because a lot of things that are given to you here in the media, even what I say, go take a moment and look it up and be vigilant on what you read and what people are saying. Listen to both ends. And listen to the facts and statistics, the facts and the evidence. Remember, facts and evidence is very important. For the reason is, saying something that someone is, or someone is racial, or basically that they're a supremacist or something like that, doesn't mean that they are. It doesn't mean that someone is trying to run an agenda that is against you. Read up, look to what they are saying, because a lot of the things they're saying are lies. And the only way you're going to know about it is if you pay attention to what's being said. And the last thing I want to put is that there is a lawsuit right now. One America News is suing MSNBC for claiming that they are a arm of the Russian media. Go look this up. And this is because of Rachel Maddow and some of the things she has said, which are very incorrect. And some things are very well made up. So take a moment and look that up. Look up that story. We're going to discuss it on another episode on there, because there is someone I'm trying to get us on there, and he's an ex-newsman, and I want to discuss that portion of it with him. So until next week, we're here every Friday night, 8 p.m. on YouTube and DLive. So check us out. Until the next bout, remember, this is the American Asylum on Q2Cast TV.